They called him a banished prince, but the gods knew him by another name, the bearer of an empire's seed. He walked through the ashes of Troy, turned away the love of a queen, descended into the underworld to seek the truth, and now he stands sword in hand, heart suspended between justice and vengeance, because with a single strike, he will decide whether Rome is born or never comes to be. Once upon a time, beneath a sky bruised with the memory of war, there stood the city of Troy. Majestic, proud, ancient, its towers kissed the clouds, and its gates had withstood a decade of siege. But on this quiet night, the walls that had once held back fate would fall not to sword or flame, but to a gift. Yes, a gift. A wooden horse stood by the shore. Massive, silent, mysterious. The Greek ships had vanished beyond the horizon. Only one lone man remained, weaving a tale for the weary Trojans, a tale of retreat, of surrender, and of sacred tribute to Neptune, god of the sea. He spoke with conviction, his eyes wide with the weight of fiction, urging the Trojans to take the horse inside. Inside its wooden belly, warriors held their breath. Among them was cunning Odysseus, the mind behind this final deception. The horse was no offering. It was the coffin of a city. Not everyone was fooled. A priest named Laocoon stood before the horse, voice raised like thunder. He hurled a spear against the beast's flank. It echoed, hollow, a warning wrapped in wood. But before his cries could find roots in reason, serpents slithered from the sea, divine, merciless, sent by unseen hands. They coiled and crushed him and his sons before the stunned gaze of the people. Was it punishment from the gods, or the silencing of truth? The people of Troy, desperate for peace, desperate to believe, mistook tragedy for omen. They opened the gates. The horse entered, and with it their end. As night deepened, wine flowed, and laughter rose. The Trojans celebrated what they thought was the end of war. Children danced in the streets. Mothers exhaled for the first time in years. Fathers raised goblets to absent friends. The horse loomed in the center of it all, quiet, waiting. When the moon reached its highest point, the wood creaked open. Shadows slipped into the city like phantoms. The gates were unbarred, and the Greeks returned under cover of darkness, surged inward like a tide of vengeance. Fires bloomed, screams pierced the night. Stone cracked, and blood spilled. Troy, once the jewel of the East, became a funeral pyre. But in the heart of this storm, far from the clamor and chaos, a man slept. Aeneas, son of Anchises, heir of a noble house, blessed by his mother, the goddess Venus. He dreamed not of flames or fate, but of Hector, the fallen hero of Troy, who appeared to him, shrouded in ghostlight. Hector's voice was solemn, heavy with the weight of finality. He urged Aeneas to flee, not to fight, not tonight. Troy is lost, he whispered. But your destiny, Aeneas, is not. Aeneas awoke to screams. His sword found his hand before his feet met the floor. he rushed into the burning streets, ready to die beside his countrymen. But what he saw froze him. The old king, Priam, cut down before his altar, sons fallen in his wake, temples desecrated. Then Venus came, glowing, ethereal, sorrowful. She did not speak with thunder or command with lightning. She showed him visions of what was to come, a land across the sea, a people to be born from his line, and a city greater than any the world had yet known, Rome. But first, he must survive. He turned back, his heart split between duty and grief. At his home, he found his father Anchises unwilling to leave, his son Ascanius too young to understand, and his wife Creusa pleading for safety. Aeneas begged his father to follow, and in that moment, lightning struck a sign from Jupiter. Anchises relented. With his father on his back, his son at his side, and his wife just behind Aeneas, led his family through the ruins. But fate, cruel and precise, demanded a cost. At the city's edge, Creusa was gone. He returned, calling for her, searching amid smoke and rubble. But only her ghost appeared calm and radiant. "Go," she said, "to where the Tiber flows. There you will find a new kingdom and a new queen. Do not look back." And so he wept, and then he left. Behind him, Troy collapsed in fire and ash. Before him, the sea whispered a new beginning. Aeneas was not alone. Other survivors followed him. Men who had lost brothers, women who had lost sons, children who had lost homes. Together, they built ships from the bones of their sorrow and set sail westward toward prophecy, toward peril, toward hope. The gods watched. Venus wept. Juno seethed. Juno, the queen of the gods, wounded by the past, embittered by Paris's ancient choice. She had offered him power, wisdom kingdoms, and still he had chosen Venus, chosen love, chosen the seed of this new people. Juno would not forget. She would not forgive. And so the sea darkened. Storms would rise. But Aeneas, burdened and blessed, sailed on, toward destiny, toward Rome, toward immortality. As the sun rose over the horizon, the Trojan ships silently departed the shore. Each sail was a vow. Every drop of the waves was an unfulfilled dream. Under the guidance of Aeneas, the refugees fleeing Troy began their long journey westward, a journey promised by prophecy, a journey towards a new homeland, a mighty empire, Venus. Aeneas's mother watched over her son from the heavens. She guided the winds, calming the waves. But across the sky, Juno, queen of the gods, plotted. Her heart still burned with hatred. For her each step Aeneas took was a dagger to her wounded honor. Paris had once chosen Venus over her, and Rome, the descendants of Aeneas, would one day destroy Carthage, the city she cherished above all. Their first stop took them to Thrace, where the surviving Trojans tried to build a new city. But that dream was short-lived. The god Apollo appeared to Aeneas in a dream and whispered, "This is not the land of destiny. Continue on. There are many challenges ahead, but glory awaits." Aeneas was silent. Once again, he had to set sail. They departed in the rain. On the next island, terrifying shrieks echoed through the dense forests. Harpies, half-human, half-bird creatures emerged from the shadows. With their wide wings, sharp claws, and thunderous voices, they not only drove the Trojans away, but also left behind a terrifying prophecy. You will reach the promised land, but only when you are so hungry that you must eat the very tables before you. No one understood, but the words haunted them like a ghost whispering in the wind. Leaving the island, they arrived in Epirus, where another group of Trojans had established a new city. Here Aeneas met Helenus, the son of King Priam, who possessed the gift of prophecy. Helenus revealed that Aeneas's destiny was to establish a great empire in Italy. Rome will rule the world, he said, but the road to it will be paved with tears and blood. These prophetic words were far from gentle, but Aeneas knew that destiny had never been easy. Meanwhile, Juno continued to watch. Her heart smoldered with rage, ready to burst. She knew Aeneas was nearing Sicilia, and she decided to act. She turned to Aeolus, the god of winds. "Summon a storm to destroy these Trojans," she commanded, her voice like a blade. Aeolus hesitated because the winds were not hers to command. But Juno was the queen of the gods, and she promised him a beautiful sea nymph for a wife. With that reward in mind, Aeolus agreed. Immediately, the sky darkened. Black clouds swirled. The winds howled from all directions. The sea churned violently, as if eager to swallow the fleet. The small ships rocked in the furious ocean. Men screamed as water poured into the hulls, sails tore apart. Aeneas gripped the helm tightly, praying to Jupiter for help. "If this is your will," he said, "then let me die on land, not drowned in darkness." And then, from deep beneath the sea, Neptune, the god of the ocean, emerged furious. "Who dares disturb my ocean without permission?" he roared. Upon learning that it was Juno's scheme, he intervened. With his mighty trident, he shattered the violent waves, calming the storm. The sea quieted. The ships, though battered, were still afloat. They reached the shores of Carthage, a young city newly founded by Queen Dido, who had fled her homeland of Phoenicia. And it was here a new turn of fate began. Aeneas, still wounded by the loss of Creusa, could not help but be moved by Dido's beauty, her gentle eyes, her strong voice, her heart that had known loss just like his. Dido, too, saw in Aeneas not just a warrior, but a lonely soul in need of love. Venus saw this as an opportunity. She sent Cupid, the little god of love, disguised as Aeneas's companion. With an invisible arrow, Cupid made Dido's heart stir. At a royal feast, as Aeneas recounted his journey across the seas, the death of his wife, and the prophecy of Rome, Dido was struck silent. Her heart was no longer guarded. They loved each other, passionately, violently, against all odds. Juno, seeing this, approached Venus. "If your son stays here," she said, "he will never establish Rome. Carthage will live." Venus, torn by love for her son, hesitated. But fate was not easily swayed, and amid their love, a storm began to rise. The storm had passed. The sea was calm once more, and the ships that had survived Neptune's wrath washed ashore on the coast of a young rising city, Carthage, built by Phoenician exiles and ruled by Queen Dido. Carthage shimmered like a pearl beneath the African sun. It was still new, still fragile, but full of ambition and grace. Tall walls grew along its hills. Temples rose from stone. Life returned after exile, much like the Trojans who had just arrived, weary and worn. Aeneas stepped onto land, unsure whether this was a blessing or a trap. He ventured into the heart of the city, walking past foreign markets and strange faces. His armor was battered, his eyes tired. Yet beneath the surface, his spirit still burned the fire of a man who carried destiny like a hidden crown. He entered the grand temple of Juno, carved in white marble and guarded by silent statues. And there, by chance or fate, he met her, Dido. The queen stood tall in her golden robes, her eyes sharp, yet filled with sorrow. The kind of sorrow only someone who has lost everything can carry with dignity. They spoke, their voices gentle, at first, then closer, warmer. Aeneas told her of Troy's fall, of the fire, of the wife he lost, of the son he must protect, and of the land he must still find. Dido listened, breath held like the wind in sails. She too had fled her home. She too had crossed the sea. Her husband had been murdered. Her people followed her across the waves. Carthage was her refuge, her creation. Two broken hearts, two noble exiles, one shared silence. Venus, watching from above, saw an opportunity to offer her son rest. But she knew rest would only come if love softened the weight on his shoulders. She called upon her other son, Cupid, the god of love, and sent him to Dido's court. Disguised as a child, Cupid entered Dido's palace with a box of gifts. The queen smiled at the innocent boy, not knowing that with every laugh, every glance, she was falling deeper. That night, during a grand banquet under the stars, Cupid lit a secret fire in her heart. Dido looked at Aeneas and saw more than a guest. She saw a future, a partner, a man who could help her forget the pain of the past. Aeneas, in turn, looked at Dido and saw peace, a place where he could stop running. And so, love bloomed. They hunted together in the forests. They wandered along the cliffs. One day, as a sudden rainstorm broke their path, they sought shelter in a quiet cave. There, in the echo of thunder and the hush of falling rain, their lips met. In that moment, They thought the gods had blessed their union, but the heavens stirred. Juno watched from above, amused. If Aeneas stayed in Carthage, he would never reach Italy. Rome would never rise. And Carthage, Juno's cherished city, would never fall. She approached Venus with an offer. Let them marry. Let them be happy here. It will end the journey, the war, the prophecy. Venus hesitated. Her son deserved peace. He had lost so much. And yet, the words of Jupiter still echoed in her memory. Far above, on the throne of the gods, Jupiter had not forgotten what he had ordained. Aeneas's destiny was not comfort. It was greatness, and greatness demanded sacrifice. So Jupiter sent Mercury, the messenger of the gods, swift as lightning, silent as wind. Mercury found Aeneas, gazing at the sea, perhaps wondering if the waves still remembered his name. The god spoke with words heavy as stone. You forget your duty. You were not meant to linger. You were meant to build. Rome awaits. Aeneas felt the chill in his chest. He did not speak. He did not cry. He simply looked back at Carthage, at the palace, at the woman who had offered him warmth. He knew what he had to do. But how do you say goodbye to someone who made you believe in life again? He couldn't. So he didn't. One night, as the moon hung low and the city slept, Aeneas and his men readied their ships. Quietly, they set sail. The wind was cold, his heart colder. Dido awoke too late. She ran to the shore, eyes searching the horizon, heart shattering with each heartbeat. She called his name. There was no answer. The sails were already disappearing into the mist. Betrayal, grief, rage. Dido returned to her palace in silence. She ordered a pyre to be built, a great wooden structure, tall and wide, meant for offerings. She climbed to the top, and as the sun rose, she spoke her final curse. Rome and Carthage will be enemies forever. War shall follow them through centuries. Let this be my vengeance. And then she fell into the fire. The smoke rose to the sky, carrying her spirit upward. The gods were silent. Aeneas did not look back. He sailed on, heart torn, but hands steady. He had chosen duty. He had chosen Rome. But the ghost of Carthage would never leave him. Behind him, a flame. Before him, a promise. The sea had turned solemn again. Not stormy, but still as if the waves themselves were mourning. Aeneas stood at the helm, eyes locked on the horizon, but his thoughts drifted backward. Behind him, a queen had died for love, and though he had not struck the blow, he felt its wound. Her final curse echoed in the wind, a silent vow that Rome and Carthage would forever clash. But Aeneas could not look back. Destiny does not dwell in the past. After long days at sea, the fleet returned to the island of Sicily. Here, once again, the Trojans stepped onto land. But it was not celebration that greeted them. It was memory. A year had passed since the death of Anchises, Aeneas's father. The hero declared a time of mourning, and funeral games were held to honor the old man's life. There were races, songs, and prayers. But beneath the surface, unrest stirred again. Juno had not forgotten. She sent whispers into the ears of the Trojan women. Old voices, full of longing, urging them to stay, to stop running. Burn the ships, the voices said. Build a life here. Haven't you had enough of wandering? And so they did. Flames licked the sides of the ships. Sailcloth turned to ash. The men shouted. Aeneas ran. He watched his fleet, his only path to fate, go up in smoke. Despair clouded his chest like storm clouds, and then once more he dropped to his knees and prayed, Jupiter, if there is still purpose in this journey, send rain, save what remains. The sky answered. A sudden downpour washed over the fire, saving the few ships left. But even the gods demand offerings. Jupiter asked for a life in return. Soon after, Palinurus Aeneas's loyal helmsman was taken by the sea. As he stood watch at night, a slumber sent by the gods closed his eyes. He slipped overboard and vanished beneath the waves. Aeneas wept, but pressed forward. His feet finally touched the soil of Italy. Not the final destination, but the threshold. There, in a place near modern-day Naples, stood the ancient cave of the Sibyl, a prophetess, a bridge between worlds. She was guardian of the temple of Apollo and the keeper of secrets that lay beyond death. Aeneas approached her with reverence. I must enter the underworld, he said. I need to speak to my father. The Sibyl's eyes, clouded with divine fire, met his. Many seek the land of the dead, she whispered. Few return. Still, she agreed, but warned him. To enter the realm of shadows, he must first find a golden bough, a magical branch hidden deep in a sacred forest. Without it, the gates would remain closed. With prayer and persistence, Aeneas found the bough. It shimmered in the darkness like sunlight captured in leaves. And so, with the Sibyl as his guide, he descended. They passed through a hidden door beneath the earth. The light faded. The air grew cold. Echoes drifted like mist at the banks of the river. Acheron souls wandered, lost, forgotten. Some cried out for passage, but the ferryman Charon would not take them. They had no coin, no burial, no rest. The Sibyl handed him the golden bough. Charon nodded and ferried them across. On the other side, Cerberus, the three-headed hound, snarled and bared its teeth. But the Sibyl, wise in ancient ways, offered a honeyed cake. The beast lay down, lulled into slumber. Aeneas pressed on. First came Tartarus, a place of screams and chains. Here were the wicked traitors, tyrants, souls who had defied the gods. Aeneas turned his face away, but the Sibyl made him look. You must remember this, she said. Duty is not just about destiny. It is about honor. Then they entered Elysium, a land of golden fields and gentle breezes where heroes rested in eternal peace. There, beneath a tree with silver leaves, Aeneas found his father. Anchises looked up, his spirit brighter than memory. "My son," he whispered, and they embraced, not in flesh, but in love. They walked together through Elysium, and Anchises showed him the river Lethe, where souls came to forget, preparing for new lives. And then the vision, a parade of spirits, some young, some wise, all waiting to be born. These Anchises said are your descendants. They will be kings, poets, warriors. They will build an empire like no other. And there, shining like a star, stood Augustus, the future emperor. Anchises lifted his voice. He will bring peace after war, justice after chaos. He will carry the flame of Troy into eternity. Aeneas stood in awe. The weight of his journey now felt holy. Then his father grew quiet. "Return, my son," he said. "What you saw was not a promise, but a possibility. It depends on you, on your choices, on your courage." And with that, the vision faded. Aeneas and the Sibyl returned to the surface world, stepping into the sunlight, as if waking from a sacred dream. His purpose was clear now. Rome was not just a city. It was Aeneas stood once more beneath the open sky. The underworld now lay behind him, its visions still glowing within his heart. He could feel his father's words echo like sacred wind. "Rome shall rise from your trials, but only if you endure." The ships moved again, skimming the soft curve of Italy's southern shore. Land grew close. Aeneas felt it not as a sailor does with maps and stars, but as a soul drawn to its purpose. This was Latium. The land was quiet. Rolling hills, golden meadows, rivers that hummed old lullabies. But beneath its calm forces had begun to stir ancient, unseen, and divine. Latium was ruled by King Latinus, a man of age and vision. He had no sons, only one daughter, Lavinia. Many had asked for her hand, but none had pleased the gods. One night, Latinus dreamed of burning torches. His daughter's hair caught flame, yet she was unharmed. A voice whispered, "A stranger will come. He will wed her. His blood shall rule the world." So when the Trojans arrived and stepped onto Lushan soil, Latinus saw not invaders, but prophecy fulfilled. He welcomed Aeneas with open arms and offered peace and Lavinia. But peace is never just a handshake. In another corner of Latium, a warrior stirred. Turnus, king of the Rutulians, was bold, fierce, and proud. He too had once been promised Lavinia. He saw the Trojan prince not as a guest, but a thief. Aeneas had stolen his place, his bride, his glory. Still, Turnus might have accepted Latinus's choice. If not for Juno, the goddess had not given up. She saw Aeneas coming closer to fulfilling destiny, and her anger grew sharper. Carthage, her beloved city, still lay unborn in the distance. And Rome, his Rome, would one day destroy it. Not if she could stop it. So Juno summoned the Furies, ancient spirits of vengeance, born from blood and shadow. They whispered poison into the hearts of men. One crept into the mind of Queen Amata Lavinia's mother, convincing her that Turnus was the rightful match. Another fanned the flames in Turnus's heart, igniting jealousy into rage. Peace trembled. War inhaled. Aeneas, unaware, hoped only to begin building. He walked the land with quiet reverence, planting stakes, planning settlements. He imagined schools and temples, olive trees, and laughter. He imagined a home not just for himself, but for generations. But fate had its own blueprints. One morning, the sounds of horns shattered the valley. Trojans and Rutulians stood across from each other, weapons raised. Words had failed. The peace was broken. Aeneas tried to reason. This land is vast. We can share it. We bring no sword without cause, but Turnus had already sharpened his. The first battles came swiftly. Brief clashes scattered losses. But more than swords, alliances began to form. Aeneas sought help from the Etruscans' enemies of Turnus. They joined him, their banners dark and proud, and as he traveled north to forge bonds, he encountered a place with no name, yet only 7 hills rising from the earth like giants sleeping beneath the grass. There, he met the Arcadians' Greek settlers, who welcomed him with warmth. One of their leaders, a young warrior named Pallas, became close to Aeneas, like a younger brother or a son. His courage was bright, his soul kind. Aeneas looked at Pallas and saw hope not just for war, but for peace after it. Back in Latium, Turnus prepared. He called upon his own allies, fierce tribes from across Italy. Among them were warriors as wild as storms, and even a band of Amazonian fighters, women who fought not with anger, but with fire in their veins. In the heavens, Venus watched with worry. She had given her son strength, but strength needs steel. So she turned to her husband Vulcan, the god of forge, and asked for weapons worthy of fate. And so beneath a mountain, Vulcan struck his hammer. Each blow echoed like a heartbeat of destiny. He forged a shield that shimmered like prophecy itself. Upon it were scenes not from the past, but from the future. The glory of Rome, the triumphs, the emperors, the stars that would one day circle its crown. Venus gave the weapons to Aeneas. They are more than tools, she whispered. They are promises. As the Trojans armed themselves, Turnus made his move. Learning that Aeneas was away from camp, he struck, leading a surprise assault on the Trojan fort. The battle was fierce. Fires roared. Arrows cut the sky, but the Trojans, even leaderless, held strong. Turnus entered the gates. For a moment, he stood victorious. But something, perhaps a whisper from the gods, told him to retreat. The walls did not fall, not yet. In the realm of Olympus, Juno and Venus stood before Jupiter. They pleaded, each for their son, their vision, their will. But Jupiter lifted his hand. No more meddling, he said. Let fate decide. Let men prove their worth. And so the gods watched in silence. Aeneas returned with his new allies. Together, they marched south, swords ready, hearts heavy. This would not be a clash of armies. It would be a clash of futures. The valley of Latium no longer hummed with peace. Now it echoed with war drums, hooves on dry earth, and prayers whispered in the shadows. The Trojans had returned with their allies, the Etruscans in gleaming bronze, the Arcadians swift and fierce. And together they formed a tide of warriors flowing toward one fate. Turnus stood at the head of his own army, proud tall, his armor burning beneath the sun. He had once sought love. Now he sought only victory. His gaze turned cold as steel. Aeneas would not take his land nor his future, and in the sky above the gods kept their distance. Jupiter had forbidden them from interfering. This was no longer their war. It was a war of men, of hearts, of choices. The first clash shook the earth. Arrows filled the air like falling stars. Spears broke against shields. Swords found bone, and blood met soil. Among the Arcadians, young Pallas rode with courage burning in his chest. He was not born for battle, but he fought like one fated to change the world. Aeneas had entrusted him with command, believing in his promise. But war is not moved by promise, only by consequence. Turnus met Pallas on the battlefield. The boy stood firm. Turnus, like a storm, struck hard. The duel was swift. When it ended, Pallas lay still, his sword fallen from his fingers. Turnus, triumphant, stripped the golden belt from the boy's body, a trophy to carry a message to send. The news reached Aeneas like thunder. He knelt beside Pallas's body. He did not speak. He did not cry, but something in him shifted. The man who once sought peace, who begged for compromise, now rose with the silence of vengeance. Not rage, but resolve. This was not just about cities or thrones anymore. This was about honor and the cost of becoming legend. Aeneas rejoined the war, no longer seeking to end it with words. He struck like fire. Warriors fell before him. Camps burned behind him. Each step forward carried the weight of Troy, of his father, of Creusa, of Dido, and now of Pallas. Even Turnus began to feel the shift. He had dreamed of glory, but now dreams twisted into visions of fire and silence. His soldiers were falling, his allies retreating. Fate was tightening like a net around his throat. A council was called. King Latinus sat silent, aged beyond years. His wife, Queen Amata, pleaded for war to end. "This blood must stop," she whispered. "Too much has been lost already." But Turnus, proud to the bone, refused. "I will end this," he declared. "With my own hands." He sent a message to Aeneas, a challenge, one final duel. Just the two of them. The fate of the war of Latium, of Lavinia, of the future, would be decided in a single combat. The people gathered. Warriors formed a circle. Priests made offerings to the gods. A hush fell over the land. Aeneas arrived, his armor shining like a morning star. Turnus stood across from him, tall, unbowed, but weary. They raised their swords, and destiny watched. The duel was fierce, a dance of steel and breath. Blow for blow, they moved like echoes of ancient heroes. But Aeneas had been shaped by storms and sorrow. Each loss had carved strength into his soul. Turnus, bold and wild, fought like a flame. But flames flicker when the wind grows too strong. Aeneas struck. Turnus stumbled. The final blow was ready. Aeneas raised his sword, but paused. Turnus, wounded, knelt. He met Aeneas's eyes. No defiance now, just breath and memory. If I must die, Turnus said, then let my body return to my people. Do not deny them that mercy. For a moment, Aeneas stood still. He thought of Troy. He thought of Dido. He thought of Pallas. His gaze dropped to Turnus's belt, the golden belt of the boy he could not protect. And mercy turned to fear. With one final strike, Aeneas ended the duel. Turnus fell. The war was over. Silence spread across the land like a blanket. Not peace, not yet, but the first breath of it. The Trojans would build. The Latins would endure. And from their union would come a new people, a new name, Romans. And in time, that name would echo across continents through centuries. But tonight, it was only a whisper on the wind. Aeneas stood over the field, the weight of history pressing gently on his shoulders. Not as a conqueror, but as a bridge between gods and men, between ruin and renewal. The hero's journey was complete, but the story of Rome had only just begun, and so the sword was lowered. Turnus's final breath faded into the wind. The warriors around him grew still. No more cries of battle, no more clash of shields, just the sound of rustling leaves as if the land itself had exhaled. Aeneas stood in the silence, not triumphant, but full of weight, full of memory, full of something too vast for words. The war was done, and with its ending, something ancient began to stir. Roots reached into soil. Stone met vision. And on that very ground, the first seed of Rome was quietly planted, not in ceremony, but in sacrifice. Days passed. Aeneas did not crown himself king. He did not build monuments to his name. Instead, he brought the people together. Trojans and Latins, not as conquerors and conquered, but as one family, joined by fire and fate. He married Lavinia, the daughter of King Latinus. Their son would be named Silvius, and from him, generations would come. Generations who would speak new words, write new laws, sing new songs. And from that mingling of blood and belief, the Roman people would rise. But Aeneas himself did not live to see Rome. He vanished, as many heroes do not in battle, not in age, but into legend. Some say he became a god. Others that he simply walked into the morning mist and was never seen again. Perhaps he returned to his mother Venus, or perhaps his story was complete, and the world no longer needed his shadow. What matters most is what remained, the memory The myth, the soul of a man who fled fire and found future. Many years later, in a different Rome, a Rome of marble columns and crowded forums, a man named Virgil would take up a pen. He was no warrior. He did not command armies or kneel to kings. He lived in a time of transition when the Republic had ended and a new empire had begun to rise beneath the rule of Augustus Caesar. Rome was vast by then, but it was weary. Civil war had broken its spirit. Trust was thin, hope fragile. So Augustus, the new emperor, sought something more powerful than laws. He sought story, and Virgil gave it to him. With careful words and patient verses, he wrote the Aeneid not as a history book, but as a healing, not as propaganda, but as poetry. A mirror held gently before a nation. He told the story of Aeneas, the noble exile, the faithful son, the reluctant warrior, and planted it at the root of Rome's greatness. Virgil knew that truth is not always fact. Sometimes it is feeling. Aeneas may not have truly walked across the ashes of Troy or sailed into the underworld. He may not have faced Turnus on the fields of Latium. But in Rome's heart, he had always lived, because every city needs a soul, and every soul needs a story. The Aeneid became more than a poem. It became a candle passed through centuries, from monk to scholar, from artist to child. Its verses carved themselves into music and marble. Its rhythm echoed in opera houses, in libraries, in whispered prayers. But time is gentle, and with each passing age, the poem faded from fame. The Iliad and the Odyssey took its place in the schoolroom. New heroes filled the shelves, new myths were born, and yet the flame never truly died. Even now, thousands of years later, when the world has changed beyond imagining, Aeneas still walks in the quiet corners of our minds. We see him in the single parent crossing a border, carrying their child through uncertainty. We see him in those who lose everything and build again anyway. We hear him in the voice that says, "Keep going. There is more. There is meaning." Because the Aeneid was never just about Rome. It was about resilience, about walking through ruin and choosing to plant something anyway, about not turning back even when your heart begs you to, about love and loss, and the cost of becoming something greater than yourself. Tonight, as you rest beneath your own roof, beneath stars that Aeneas once looked upon, listen. There is no need to remember every name, or every god, or every battle. Just remember the feeling of fire behind you, of wind ahead, and of a quiet voice inside that dares to say, "I will begin again." Because maybe you, too, are carrying something sacred. Maybe your journey, like his, is not yet finished. Maybe tomorrow is your Italy. Maybe your Rome is waiting. And maybe, just maybe, you are already a legend in someone's eyes. Sleep well, dreamer. You have walked far tonight, and your story, like his, is just beginning. And so, from the ashes of a burning city, as an empire quietly began, not through a crown, but through loss, not through glory, but through sacrifice. Aeneas never asked to be a legend, but he became one. because sometimes the ones who shape history are simply those who dare to keep walking when all that's left is smoke and ruin. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Keep the fire in your heart, because who knows, maybe you are the beginning of a new legend.